Welcome to today's show. I am your host, Eric Darnley Small. And on today's show, I have a couple of very interesting stories I want to share with you. I want to begin by saying that you can see this show both on our YouTube channel and on stream.vtip.me. We are no longer doing live shows, as I have put up a video earlier and explained why. You can take a look at that. No one was watching the live show, so I'm sure you're not even interested. So, going back to this first story, this is a formerly enslaved lawmaker who is warning about rewriting Black history. And this is from the Washington Post. It was on April 27th. This was on last Saturday. Ari Berman, as I mentioned, is the writer who has been talking about this for a long time. And it says this article is adapted from Minority Rule, the right-wing attack on the will of the people and the fight to resist it. And in it, Berman goes into this gentleman here that you can see pictured, John Lynch. And he says, more than a century before the backlash to the post-George Floyd racial reckoning produced book bans and restrictions on Black history curriculums, a pioneering Black lawmaker wrote a landmark critique of white historians' attempts to rewrite the narrative of the Reconstruction era. In 1913, John Roy Lynch published The Facts of Reconstruction, one of the first histories of the era written by a Black leader who participated in the South's transformation after the Civil War. In the book, Lynch recounted his improbable life story. Born into slavery on a plantation in Louisiana, he was freed by the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 and moved to Natchez, Mississippi, where he received an informal education by overhearing the lessons from a local white school across the alley from his job at a photography store. In 1870, at the age of 22, he joined Mississippi's first integrated legislature, helping ratify the 14th and 15th Amendments, which guaranteed equal citizenship to formerly enslaved people and voting rights to Black men. African Americans comprised more than 50% of the legislature and held the offices of Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, and Secretary of Education. As Black influence grew in the majority Black state, outnumbered white residents resorted to increasing extreme tactics to regain power. In 1875, segregationists took back the state by force, forming militia groups that attacked integrated political meetings and kept Black voters from the polls. Lynch lost his seat in Congress a year later when Democratic election officials invalidated nearly 5,000 votes cast for him. Then came the revisionism. The histories of the era, written by Lynch's white contemporaries, described the period as a tragic farce, not because multiracial democracy had been overturned so violently and abruptly, but because it had been attempted at all. Black Southerners were portrayed as ignorant and corrupt, undeserving of the benefits of citizenship, and easily duped by greedy Northern carpetbaggers and conniving Southern scallywags. Lynch wrote The Facts of Reconstruction after Mississippi and settling in Chicago to counteract the weaponization of history. Quote, very much, of course, has been written and published about Reconstruction, but most of it is superficial and unreliable, and besides, nearly all of it has been written in such a style and tone as to make the alleged facts related harmonize with what was believed to be demanded by public sentiment. He wrote, his goal was to present the other side. In the late 1880s, James Ford Rhodes, an Ohio industrialist turned amateur historian, began publishing his highly popular 7-volume History of the United States from the Compromise of 1850 to the final restoration of Home Rule at the South in 1877. Quote, no policy in our country, he wrote, has ever been so conspicuous a failure as that of forcing universal Negro suffrage upon the South. He referred to the Reconstruction as the oppression of the South by the North. Lynch critiqued Rhodes' work in a series of articles in the Journal of Negro History in 1917 and 1918 following the publication of The Facts of Reconstruction. Quote, I regret to say that so far as the Reconstruction period is concerned, It is not only inaccurate and unreliable, but it is the most biased, partisan, prejudiced historical work I have ever read. Lynch drew on his own experiences to defend Reconstruction, in addition to passing landmark civil rights laws and integrated Mississippi legislature built new roads, hospitals, and schools while instituting landmark reforms such as the first system of public education. The state governments under Reconstruction were the best governments those states ever had before or have had ever since, Lynch argued, because they were the first and only governments in that section that were based upon the consent of the governed. But Lynch's defense of Reconstruction was overshadowed by the writings of white historians hostile to black suffrage, led by Columbia University historian William Archibald Dunning and his influential PhD students, many of whom traveled from the South to study with him. They were the first generation of professional historians who produced seminal works on Reconstruction and detailed studies of each Southern state that defied how the era was understood for decades. The Dunning School provided an, quote, intellectual foundation for Jim Crow, the Columbia University historian Eric Foner wrote. This rewriting of history propelled the Lost Cause movement, led to the Confederate veterans and their families, which promoted reconciliation efforts with the North by portraying the Civil War not as a fight to maintain slavery, but as a noble struggle to preserve the Southern way of life. As Reconstruction laws were wiped from the books, monuments were erected to Confederate generals throughout the South. The works of Rhodes and Dunning circulated widely, and the ultra-racist 1915 film The Birth of a Nation was a smash hit, becoming the first film shown at the White House and reviving the Ku Klux Klan. Lynch, in his efforts to preserve an accurate version of history of Reconstruction, have been largely forgotten. But as the country once again argues over its racial past, his work is arguably more important than ever. Here. A number of things I wanted to speak out on this. What's old is new again. I mean, this guy, James Ford Rhodes, the Ohio industrialist, this is like Elon Musk. I mean, this desire for some rich dude to come along and he doesn't know history. He's just decided he's going to make it up because he's rich and he has the ability to do it. And then, of course, to have these guys who are the Archibald Dunning. This is like, name the conservative author, these guys who did the 1776 project that Donald Trump tried to shove down people's throats. I mean, you just have to just look around and you'll see they're chock full of them in the Trump administration, of these guys who are willing to sit back there and lie about what this country is doing and what has done in its history. And so what's old is new again. And it's important to recognize that what happened to African Americans in this country, what happened, and the reason why, it also explains, ironically, the reason why so many blacks still remain in Mississippi. Because you can imagine that, if you were a part of the privileged few blacks during that time of Reconstruction, and then you were kicked out after, maybe, you would probably be, let's say your great grandfather would have been one of the privileged few who had real power during Reconstruction. He's kicked out. Then you could imagine that maybe things don't go south, pun intended, or don't go badly immediately. And maybe their children are there trying to fight the good fight to, reverse what was going on. But they get such pushback that their lives may be ruined, but maybe their child, who would be probably someone like, I would figure probably someone by now who would be 50, 60 years old or so. Their children still believe that you can change Mississippi, you can turn things around, things can get better again. But unfortunately, Jim Crow comes in, then that leads to the civil rights movement, then it leads to conservatism, and things never get better for blacks in Mississippi. And it is quite a shame, all throughout the South, because this story can be replicated over and over again about how the rich people, how legislators, how folks all over sat back, once they got back into power after Reconstruction, after domestic terrorism, by the way, on these black communities, how they turned around, turned on their own citizens, and then wiped the books clean. That's what's happening again right now in Florida and Texas and Alabama and Mississippi and all of these red states. They are doing everything they can to wipe the books of anything that might indicate that slavery was a problem, that it was about race, that the problems today of blacks is about race and goes back to Reconstruction, to the post-Reconstruction era, etc. They don't want anyone to know about this history. And this is why ultimately the Republican Party has become under the spell of a liar. Because these lies really become a part of people's identity. And when you begin to push against lies, you begin to push against these fake truths, people get angry and people get emotional. My father used to call it paradigmatic stress anxiety. And people become very, very, very angry, very, very stressful. And it's almost like you physically attack them when you begin to push it back against these lies. But truth is the only disinfectant. It's the only way a MAGA or a Donald Trump or the next Donald Trump, the only way to keep them from power. And unfortunately, right now, it's not working. But we have to fight back. And by the way, these lies were carried by a lot of people who are not pro-MAGA. These are never Trumpers who have carried these lies, right? And, and legitimately, if you've had your entire life been told lies and been told these stories, you could see how you would think that the truth is a lie, but it is not. And hopefully the best thing to come out of this whole era is not just Trump, but that people realize that the truth is the only way forward. Hey there, fantastic viewers. Eric Darnley Small here, and I hope you're loving today's episode of What You Missed. You've reached the end of today's show, but don't worry, there's more show coming up. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click the bell so that you'll be notified when more content is available. You can also help the channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm find new viewers so that I can keep bringing you all this incredible content you enjoy. But wait, there are more ways to support the show. You can make a contribution through the show's PayPal, which goes a long way in helping produce even better content for you. And consider becoming a part of our growing community by joining our Mastodon site at mastodon.vtip.me/@whatyoumissed for more engaging discussions and exclusive updates. And here's something you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for our live show streaming on YouTube and stream.vtip.me Monday mornings, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Your support means the world to me, and together we're making What You Missed the best it can be. Thanks for being a part of my journey.